All right, we are live, Elton.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it. And welcome. Just want to do a quick intro of Anthony. Anthony, who is I, as I see names coming up on the participants list, certainly I recognize a few names. Some of you have seen Anthony. Anthony is our operations director and a faithful partner in crime in the webinar game all these years. So thank you, Anthony. Anthony will jump back on with us. Any intro words, Anthony?
No, I'm gonna put any questions you have in the Q&A and chat. I'll be taking a look at it. So we'll
All
try to
right,
get
fantastic.
through as much as possible.
Okay, so Anthony will join back in with us at the end, and excited to have everybody on. And as I always do, I'm always excited to see where people are calling in from. So if you don't mind, go ahead and go on to the chat and just let us know what grade you are in. If you're a parent, let us know what grade your student is in and then what city you're from. That would be fantastic. And we've been getting a lot of families from all over the U.S., including at times from Asia, occasionally from Europe. And so excited to have everybody here. Thank you. Hey, Portland, Oregon. Awesome. Certainly a lot of Californians. Appreciate all the Californians. Understand from Hong Kong. Thank you. Thank you. Um, uh, San Jose, Los Altos, Palo Alto, Cupertino, of course, we're based in California. Always appreciate the Californians who are here. And of course Tracy, California. Hi, I'm from the Central Valley, so I appreciate the the Central Valley people. And then of course Austin, Texas. So appreciate that. So go ahead and keep putting down in the chat where you're from and also what age your student, if you're a parent, what age your student is in, or what grade your student is in, and then if you're a student, certainly what grade you're currently in. So, um, excited to be with you today. We do this webinar once a year. It's the College Admissions Trends for 2026. What I try to do is I try to review all the kind of incremental movements that are happening in the college admissions landscape, what I think is helpful. I think for all high school students, but especially if you are a rising junior and senior and you are approaching the college application process, I think it's important to think about um, some of these shifts and how it impacts maybe the colleges you're selecting to apply to, how you're preparing, whether you're taking the SAT or the ACT, and yeah, how you're navigating this forthcoming college app process. So, and I do see some names that I have seen certainly on previous webinars. Number one, I'm grateful that you're here. Number one, I'm grateful for the people who have really enjoyed these webinars. The goal is really for it to be as helpful as I can. And then I do want to tell you that like if I can just make a suggestion to you, you can do whatever you like with the content. But if I were to make a suggestion to you, just instead of trying to absorb everything that's here, because there's a fair amount of data, there are some adjustments to last year, even though the format perhaps of last year's trends presentation may be similar to this year's format. There is some different data that I'm going to present. But the goal isn't to absorb every data point. The goal is to, really isolate maybe one or two, or maybe at most three things that you think are helpful, applicable to your situation. And then again, find an opportunity to share that with somebody else and interact with those takeaway points in your particular context. As mentioned before, there's a Q&A box. Go ahead and go into the Q&A box and post any question at any time. So just if you like have a question, we'll come back to it at the end, but post it in the Q&A box so that we have this running log, and then we will tackle as many questions as we can. I do have a fair amount of content. I will do my best to get through it, and then we'll do our best to hang on as long as we can to answer as many questions as we can. So let me do a quick intro of myself. My name is Elton Lin. I'm CEO and founder of Illuminate Education. I've been doing college advising for almost 16 years. I mean, it's been a long time and I've seen quite a bit. And our team at Illumina Education, we work with almost 450 students a year, submit over 2,000 apps a year, read like almost 4,000 essays a year. So even within our context, we see quite a bit. Our president and consulting director is a former UC admissions counselor. We have a former Brown Rice, USC, UT Austin, UC Berkeley admissions director on our advisory board. So we have a fair amount of visibility into the college app process. We've had students submitted to every top 50, including every Ivy League multiple times over. Our internal admit rate to top 15 schools is up to 7x the national average. And I've been fortunate enough to be profiled in some national level media outlets around the United States. So excited to be with you today. Well, we're going to talk about the most critical trends, how to respond to those trends. We may intersperse a few student examples in between, and then we're going to do our best to try to answer as many questions as we can. So, what are the current trends in college admissions? I think again, I don't think any of these trends are going to be blowing your mind. I think it in some sense is going to be as expected, but let's kind of dig into some of the nuances here. Number one, of course, applications are up. That's not rocket science. But I would also contend that the application increase from the difference between 2024, 2025 and 2025, 2026 is less than what it was the previous year. So 41% increase since 2020, increase in public schools, a slight increase in private schools. Actually, for some private schools, including some Ivy League schools, the applicant pool has declined. Now we can get into, if you're really curious, we can get into the why, we can get into the Q&A, but there always is a little bit of ebb and flow in the applicant pool. But by and large, even though I know there's some counselors who are on the call, they are very aware of a demographic cliff with regards to fewer high school graduates who are applying to universities. Um, but the total number of applications has increased, and but there also is a slight decrease in international students. Now, we can get into some of the environment ecosystem with regards to that. But those are some of the micro ebb and flows with regards to the applicant pool. With regards to, I mean, if you're just looking at the admit rate between 2020, 2025, um, Harvard 4.92, the 2025 rate is 3.59. Frankly, it like doesn't mean much. They're all single digits. They're all very difficult to get into. MIT at 7%, MIT at 4.5%, really about the same, to be frank. So everything for the most selective schools, it really is about the same. But when you start isolating schools like NYU, UCLA, USC, even like UT Austin, University of Washington, schools that um, certainly when I applied to college were considered more safe, even 10 years ago were considered more likely. Now in 2025, many of which are single digit admit rates. You're talking about NYU at a 7%, UCLA below 10%, of course. To me, USC at 10% is pretty absurd. From when I applied to college back in 1991, and the UT Austin specifically, if you're out of state international, not the overall admit rate, but specifically out of state, it's 7.8%. University of Washington at 39%. Did go up a little bit. 2024 was 38%. But I think that again, the trend line for a lot of these schools is going downward, certainly due to greater selectivity. I do want to isolate maybe one newer phenomena. I don't think it's a surprise phenomena, but like specifically as an example, Vanderbilt University, top 20 university, outstanding school. I sometimes find that maybe some families in the West Coast, I mean, we're in the Bay Area, they don't recognize what an amazing school Vanderbilt is. But if you just look at the applicant volume, like as compared to this is the 2020 and 2030, it's class of 2020. So just so you're not confused by what those years mean, if you compare class of 2020 to class of 2030, they went from a high, like a 28,000 applicants to like almost 50,000 applicants in the span of 10 years. And then when you're talking about like as compared to like Vanderbilt's yield, if you're not familiar with that term, is the percent of students, a percent of the admitted students who actually come. So which means that Vanderbilt's overall like yield has also increased, which means that in their class of 2029, like over 60% of the students they admitted end up coming, um, which um, which means that over the course of time, Vanderbilt has been able to like extend fewer and fewer offers of admission. So which leads to a school like Vanderbilt having a record low 2.8% admit rate from this past year. So to me, it's a little crazy, right? And can understand the like whether you might consider Vanderbilt on par with like a Harvard or a Penn or a Yale. I mean, we can that's another presentation for another time. But what's happening is that a lot of the schools in that next tier, right? So if you're kind of maybe setting aside the top 15 schools, Ivy Leagues, Duke, University of Chicago, putting that aside, and then the next tier of schools, which includes like a Vanderbilt, a WashU, the USCs, the Carnegie Mellons, that next bracket of school is becoming increasingly more selective. Admit rate is going down. And what ends up happening is that the students who maybe thought that they really have no chance for like a Harvard or a Stanford or a Princeton, they're focusing their attention on that next bracket of schools, often applying early decision and then making that school, that school becomes, again, more selective, more difficult to get into. They're able to optimize some of their approaches to admitting a class, and then you get this super low admit rate. So I'm not saying every school in that, like, say, 50 to 30 range is a 2.8% admit rate. That's not the case, but it almost seems like it's moving in that direction where that next bracket of schools is also becoming a little bit becoming more selective. And then why is this happening? As I mentioned, 1 in 5 students are applying to 10 plus schools. If it's harder to get in, then you're going to apply to more schools. I mean, that's very normal, but that makes it challenging on both sides. It's challenging on the student side. It's also challenging on the university side because they don't know who's coming. That will lead us into the next trend forthcoming. But more students are applying to more schools. There are this sort of sub bracket of what they call new Ivies or Southern Ivies, and Vanderbilt will be in that category. But you're talking about a Vanderbilt, a Rice, Emory, some might include a Tulane in there. But you're getting another bracket of very prestigious universities that are attracting a larger pool of students. And so you're having this type of kind of branding phenomena that's happening among other groups of schools. Duke would also be in that category. In-state publics also seeing growth because again, you're applying to a lot of schools. If you don't get in, you end up going into the best in-state public school you can get into. A different phenomena that's been happening for a couple years, but super significant in the past year is this migration to southern schools. I do find that and whether that matters to you who's on this call right now, I don't to be frank with you, with all the students and families that are working with us, we don't get a ton of students who are applying into southern schools. And when I say southern schools, I mean specifically like a Tennessee or an Auburn or an Alabama. But the reality is that how it does affect us who may not be considering like an Auburn is that there are more students from different other parts of the United States who are then moving towards the South. And that may possibly create more demand in other regions. And it may be to where the impact of early decision may be more impactful. Now we can talk about that once we get to that section. But there's a significant migration to southern schools. Let's take a look at the UCs. UC Berkeley admissions trend. I don't need to over explain this. Applicant pool as compared to admit rate. I think what we're seeing is that it's increasingly become, it's still difficult. It's been difficult for a long time. It remains difficult. UCLA been about the same. I don't see UC Berkeley or UCLA changing. Here is a comparison between Berkeley and LA with the admit rate. I think it is what it is, and it's not going to change significantly. But I do have some good news. Some good news is UC San Diego is working to increase enrollment, and their goal is to they're currently at around 46,000 student enrollment, and their goal is to get up to around 56 or 57,000 students in the next 10 years. So they are creating another college within the university, and their goal is to really admit more students. And to be frank with you, I've always considered, I mean, there's merit to every UC, but I think in the hierarchy of schools, UC San Diego was really considered sort of the next one after UCLA and UC Berkeley. So to me, UC San Diego creating more space is definitely a win for everybody. And I hope more public schools and private schools follow their lead, create more opportunity, and give especially both in-state and out-of-state students more opportunity to get a higher education at their institution. Um, so with all that being said, with all the shifts, the increasing number of applications, all of this kind of jockeying around with prestige and notoriety, there are still great schools, and I still feel like I still want to emphasize this to as many families as possible that there are great schools out there and many schools that still have a really high admit rate. So I'll come back to. I know some of you have seen this presentation, but I want to remind you, Santa Clara University, which is in our backyard in the San Francisco Bay Area, ranks seventh for highest mid-career salary, behind Stanford, but in head of Dartmouth and Harvard. So I mean, if your goal is really to optimize and position yourself for having the highest mid-year career salary, you really shouldn't ignore Santa Clara. Texas A&M, 49% admit rate, fourth most CEOs among S&P 500 companies. So and when you get into like strongest alumni in the United States, you oftentimes hear of Harvard and USC, but Texas A&M has one of the strongest alumni. They hire within the family. So Texas A&M, super strong, relatively high admit rate. Again, most CEOs, fourth most CEOs among S&P 500 companies. Arizona State ranked 14th for highest employability, again ahead of Cornell and UCLA. 89% admit rate to Arizona State. So tons of really interesting resources and a lot of good departments. Pepperdine. Again, I come back to I mentioned this in previous presentations, but we interviewed Pepperdine admissions director. She mentioned that they have their own counselor for advising their students who want to apply to med school. And she herself has a higher than 90% admit rate for students she works with to go to medical school, right? So to me, if like again, if your goal is to go to med school, you really need to think about like which school will help set you up best. And as I mentioned here at the bottom, UC Berkeley's matriculation rate to med school 54%, UC Santa Barbara 47%. So, I mean, it behooves you not to think about schools that may be better positioned to help you reach your goals. So what do you do? Do your research. There are good colleges out there. Apply to both public and private schools because private schools can provide more scholarships. So I oftentimes this is I feel like this is another presentation for another time, but private schools are more able to provide merit aid to supplement to even try to attract good students to come. So I'd encourage you to apply to both and apply broadly and apply to more safety schools because actually the safety school range schools are also more likely to use merit aid to try to attract you to come. So, all right, second trend is again college major matters and this though a similar trend of last year, but there's some nuance differences to it this year. Just to share with you, I wish I could give you more recent 2022 data, but the Department of Education only has 2022 data. So we can talk about governmental funding for the Department of Education another time. But with that being said, if you're scan over the majors that have the most degrees, and then maybe we can isolate some of these. Certainly, with regards to bio and health sciences, computer sciences, engineering, you're seeing a relatively massive increase. And I generally don't think those numbers are changing substantially for 2025. Though I'll contend that I think computer science is going down. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Social sciences, English, foreign languages have had a relatively precipitous drop since 2012. And so just by nature, you can understand that if you're applying into a higher demand major, it's going to be more selective. Lower demand major, maybe a little bit less selective. Here are some updated stats for UC Santa Barbara. Again, 90 majors, 118,000 applications. I'm sorry, that's 2025, not 2022. 12,000 applied to computer science. 8,500 out of those 12,000 had a 4.0 or UC GPA. Around 800 were accepted, and computer science for UC Santa Barbara, 5.5% admit rate. I do think that's going to change. So when we get 2026 data, maybe we'll do an updated maybe presentation in the fall. I think we're going to see computer science drop a little bit. For 2025 at UCLA, you're talking about life sciences at 11%, computer science 7% at UCLA last year, but in 2024 it's 3%. So I think you're already seeing this transition away from computer science into other disciplines. One of those being data science, the other being various other fields like applied math, other forms of engineering. And then nursing, I'll tell you right now, nursing's never going out of style. So if 0.5% admit rate to nursing at UCLA, AI is not impacting nursing in the way that it will impact other industries. So and if you were to focus specifically in on engineering admit rates, even within the engineering admit rate, even within the engineering department, specific engineering disciplines have different admit rates. So chemical engineering at 12%, materials 11%, civil engineering 7.6%. Just to share with you, I think there is some projections that civil engineering and electrical engineering admit rates are going to go down. Maybe higher demand into engineering disciplines that may not be as affected by AI. But civil engineering, electrical engineering, maybe mechanical engineering may be going down. So we'll see how that goes. What does this mean? In-demand majors are more selective. Strong grades with many APs is like in many cases not enough by itself. And then resumes must support your interest in higher demand majors. So let me kind of go into maybe a quick student example. And then I did update this. Again, I updated this with an updated student example from 2 years ago as opposed to a few years back. We had a 3.94 unweighted GPA, computer science 1530, 11 APs, president of the coding club, 2 coding products used by the student's school, which I think is actually very interesting. And I think, good job. Did have an internship, had 2 summer research programs. And then as compared with the student who was studying environmental science, actually specifically environmental science or ecology, depending on the school, 3.8 unweighted GPA, secretary of the sustainability club. I mean, no other relevant awards, 1 internship, 1 research program, and then they apply to these schools. So I don't want to. If we were in person, we would do a raise your hands, and we would do a what do you think? Who do you think got into what? But if I may, let me just kind of reveal this. Student applied, computer science student applied, Penn, Columbia, a lot of the UCs. Unfortunately, was only admitted to UC Santa Cruz. Was waitlisted to Columbia, San Diego, University of Michigan, Boston University. Was admitted to Tufts, was admitted to Purdue, and then currently attending Tufts. Now, I think attending Tufts is outstanding, right? So I think the student is doing great. The program specifically, I like Tufts a program with it because there's a lot of integration with cognitive science, psychology. I think it's fascinating. But certainly you might think that this student might have a few more options other than Tufts and UC Santa Cruz. And that's in large part due to computer science. For student B, environmental science or ecology, applied to a range of UCs, was admitted to BU, UC San Diego, UC Santa Cruz, rejected to UCLA, but thankfully was admitted to UC Berkeley. And so, and certainly attending UC Berkeley currently, studying environmental science. Um, so what do I do? You could certainly consider other majors, but certainly you need to think about other majors that are true of you and sort of honest to your narrative, because you can't just spend 4 years in high school exploring computer science and then want to study, like French, right? So like, I mean, if you're an admissions reviewer on the other end, it's obvious that that narrative doesn't really match up. So it's important to really think about a major that is honest to you, true of what your activities are pointing towards, and your overall narrative of your application needs to support it. So it still needs to be true of you. Apply to more target and safety schools. Again, build a resume that clearly communicates a student's interest in your major. A couple of alternative majors, as mentioned before, is applied math, cybersecurity. I don't think these majors are necessarily like super, like say, like easy to get into, but sometimes just being outside of the main pool of students is helpful. So, and then just to share with you again, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign has a CSX program where they pair computer science with other disciplines, which includes advertising, marketing, statistics, linguistics, and a lot of actually interesting, I would consider combination majors. And right now, the CSX programs have almost a 20% admit rate, while the CS through the engineering school has a 7% admit rate. And so just kind of understanding what major options you have certainly can change your admissions likelihood. And so these are some of the examples of the CSX majors. Um, and then yeah, and then so then my sense is that the even the options of these sets of combo majors are going to evolve over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, especially as I think there's going to be a transition from computer science to more data science. Yeah, more of this coming, and definitely consider your options. So don't randomly choose your major, because admissions people can detect majors that don't match for sure. I mean, your activities should support your major. And if you're, and don't forget, once you get to college, you can also minor or double major once you get there. So if you're, like your interests and motivation and curiosities reside in, like say reside in psychology, you can go to college and attain like a minor in data science or a minor in computer science to supplement your overall degree program and to graduate with if I were to suggest, graduate with multiple skill sets once you leave. I did a whole nother webinar on AI proof majors that you can watch that video. It's likely we will redo that video again, or we will do that presentation again at the end of the summer with some more updated data. But I'm really big on encouraging students to graduate with multiple skill sets, contrasting majors, get exposure to a wide range of disciplines, because the future job landscape is going to require students to interact in a lot of different places. And so start doing that once you're in college. Um, Again, with I mentioned a resume that supports your major. How can you validate your interest in your particular major? Certainly, I think it's helpful to be in competitions, whether it's science fairs, Olympiads, art and writing competitions, DECA, which is a business club, whatever competition perhaps allows students to maybe gain a few awards, have some form of outside validation to what they're doing, makes it easy for the admissions reviewer to sort of quickly ascertain whether your resume really supports your intended major. Certainly, whether you could be doing some form of research, whether it's working under an established professor, publishing research, in some cases, science fair. I've had some students patent technology that they designed. And so anything, again, where you have some kind of outside validation to support your interest in a particular area. And also consider like other metrics, like if you're working on a fundraiser, work on raising as much money as you can. If you're working on a philanthropic project, what are ways for you to help as many people as you can? Or products sold or whatever it might be. Think about how you might be able to increase your impact in some form or another. And then another way to validate your interests is through rec letters. So like outside mentors, I've had students like do like philanthropic projects with nonprofit leaders, and the nonprofit directors were able to write them an additional recommendation for their college app. So outside rec letters can also be used to validate that interest as well. I'm gonna include this only because I feel like it's in line with this college major conversation, but I don't want to. I introduce it, but I don't want to. But I'm gonna save the digging into it for our AI-proof college majors more towards the end of the summer. But there certainly is a shift away from purely computer science. And right, this was a 2024 data on the highest employment rate based on major, and excuse me. And I can send if you're interested, I'm happy to send you the link to this article. But currently, highest unemployment rate based on major, unfortunately, is anthropology. One of our consulting mentors is an anthropologist by trade, but second and fourth are computer engineering, computer science. Now, we can parse the data and kind of get into the fact that there are a lot of people with computer science degrees. There's been a lot of layoffs in the tech industry over the course of the last couple of years, and there's a little bit of outsized impact that's happening in these industries. But that there's still a need for obviously computer science and computer engineering. All those things are true, and so I'm not trying to overstate what is being said here, but there are a lot of shifts that are happening that I think what we can't do is just say, oh, just major in computer science and everything's going to be okay. Like that unfortunately is no longer here, right? So I think we need to really think about your college major maybe in a more go back to the basics of really how to think about your college major. Uh, I think there are some pundits who are projecting some majors to be less impacted by AI, and some are saying that this range of engineering is a little bit less impacted by AI. Certainly healthcare professionals, nursing less impacted, psychology, counseling, special ed, social work. But truth be told, we just don't know for sure, right? So like you could be saying this now, but it's really hard to tell really what's going to be the case in 5 to 10 years. So my encouragement to students is to really find, especially for younger students, if you're a family that's representing eighth, ninth, or 10th grade students, is to really pay attention to what fuels your motivation and curiosity. So my suggestion, gain a wider array of experiences, pay attention to what fuels motivation and drives curiosity, go deeper in those areas and find ways to help people. That's this whole aspect of really maybe expanding the metric of impacting people. And been doing this for almost 16 years, and 100% students always achieve higher, experience more joy in their areas of natural interest and motivation and curiosity. And so, if I were to, in light of college majors that are becoming a lot less clear, a little more confusing about how they lead to careers, let me encourage you to going back to areas that fuel your motivation and curiosity. All right, colleges. Trend number three: colleges admitting more via early decisions. So maybe just to explain early decision real quickly, some schools have what they call an early decision program where students can only apply to one college and only one of those early decision colleges. And if you are admitted on that early decision agreement, then you must attend. So deadlines are normally early November, early January for ED2. I can explain ED1 and ED2 another time. And then and then what it is that if you apply November 1st, early decision one, you'll hear by around December 15th. And a lot of families like just they get the result, they're super happy. You can go into your winter break super relaxed and just have a good time, and I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Some benefits is that obviously you find out results early, it reduces your stress. Sometimes you have earlier access to housing if that's important to you. And then for some students, it improves your chances of being admitted. Some detriments is that, like, if you need the first semester senior year to improve your grades, improve your GPA, you won't have it because you got to submit the early decision application on November 1st, right? So they won't see the first semester grades from your senior year because you're submitting early. You also can compare financial aid offers from different schools because you're only applying to one early decision school. You have less time to finish your app, and then you're also locked into your ED choice if you're admitted on that ED agreement. Why do colleges like early decision? Colleges don't like guesswork. Remember what I said earlier about if students are submitting more applications, it's muddier for students, but also muddier for universities. And so what's happening is that like if early decision allows the university to just your allows them to admit you and know that you're coming, it makes their enrollment process much more clear. There's less guesswork, and they know who's coming. Colleges want to accept students who want to attend. So, I mean, if you're applying early decision, obviously you're interested in attending, right? So, and ED is for them the ultimate form of demonstrated interest, the ultimate form of me demonstrating to the university that I really want to come. Colleges want applicants who will meet their institutional priorities. So oftentimes, universities will use the early decision round to try to meet their institutional goals, whether it's for number of first-gen students, students coming from rural areas, low income, underrepresented, whatever the case may be. But they like ED. Just to kind of give you maybe a glimpse at the different early decision admin rate for like a Dartmouth, that's 19% as compared to the regular round, 4% admit rate. If you're talking about like say an Amherst at a 29 and 8%, a Northwestern at 23 and 6%. And so what you're getting is that like you're getting an increased likelihood of being admitted if you're applying on early decision. There's a caveat to that, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I think what is even more problematic is that the number of applicants admitted through early decision is also increasing. So this is a comparison of the percent of freshman class admitted on early decision. So in 2024, Emory admitted 68% of their freshman class on early decision as compared to 53% in 2015. If you look at Boston University, it's 61% of their freshman class was admitted on an early decision as compared to 20%. So I almost feel like, I mean, if Boston University is a high priority for you, it again almost behooves you to apply early decision and to really make it a high priority if that's a school that you want to go to. So schools are admitting a higher percentage of their freshman class and they're leaning into early decision. And this is just a quote from the dean of students at University of Michigan. And basically, what Sarah Hubbard is saying is that we've been losing some of the best students to other schools, and so where they're waiting to hear from University of Michigan, but they're forced to make a decision on other places, and so they instituted early decision for the first time last year. And so everyone is sort of jockeying to try to lock in their student pool and make it more clear for them. So University of Michigan's acknowledging this competitiveness. If you look on the right side, Rice has instituted an early decision two, so a later timeline cycle early decision. University of Michigan, obviously first time. University of Chicago instituted, we call this an ED0, right? But they call it an SSEN. But basically, it's an early results program for students who've gone to University of Chicago for a summer program. So that's where, if University of Chicago is a priority, you might want to consider going to one of their summer programs the year or two before, right? So then it gives you access to this program to apply into. But the trend is that more and more schools will introduce some kind of strategic early program in order to help them better understand their freshman profile, freshman class. It's 5:40, and I'm going to try to get through as quickly as I can so that we can have more time for questions. So, who should apply ED? If you're done with standardized testing, great, because you need to apply November 1st. You can certainly still take the SAT or the ACT in August or September, but you're running out of time. So if you're done with standardized testing, it's great. Are you in a financial position to use the ED option? Again, you don't get to compare all the financial aid offers. So if you're in a financial position to do so, it's great. Have a first choice college, like this is a school that you really want to go to, and there's no regrets. And then you're at or above the 75th percentile for admits to that college. So we can get into this in another time. There's some college lists webinars coming up. But if you're like a 3.5 with a 1200 SAT trying to apply early decision to Johns Hopkins, that's not going to improve your chances. You're going to get more quickly rejected, unfortunately, because you're not within the bracket of students who are being admitted to Johns Hopkins. But my suggestion is that you ought to be in that 75th percentile, the upper quadrant of students who are commonly admitted, and that oftentimes makes early decision a more viable and reasonable sort of push you over towards being admitted to that school. So, all right, the last trend is testing is coming back, unfortunately. So these are the colleges that are requiring SATs and ACTs. I'll tell you, the Ivy League that is not here is Columbia. And it's May, and Columbia might still announce that they're requiring SATs or ACTs, but as of today, they are test optional. As of May 2026, they're test optional. But these are the schools that are going back to requiring. I think the bigger issue here again is the percent of the admitted class that has submitted testing. And what ends up happening is that you're getting a higher, sort of every year, you're getting a higher percent of the freshman class that is submitting tests. So what that tells you is that the school is beginning to put a higher priority on test scores to review the student to assess whether the student is a good fit for the university. And so let me give you maybe another. This is the freshest data. Like I would say most schools have not released 2030 data. It's obviously very, very class of 2030 data, which is very new. It's this year. But for Tufts, if compared to the class of 2029, this is the left is the number of applicants. The left bar is the number of applicants. I'm sorry, the left bar, the left chart is the number of applicants. The right chart is the number of admits. And then what ends up happening is that like you're getting a higher, the orange bar represents the percent of students who have test scores that are being admitted. So for the class of 2030, you're getting somewhere in the 73 to 74% of the freshman class that were admitted had test scores, as opposed to the previous class, which had maybe around 53 or 54% of the admitted class having test scores. So the trend is moving in this direction, and the trend moving towards the importance of the test score on the college app review. One of the reasons this is happening is because more students have just higher GPA. So if you can look on the chart on the right, the percent of college freshmen with an A average in high school is, I mean, as compared to 1965, has increased precipitously. And so if you're an admissions officer and you're looking at a lot of transcripts, you're by and large seeing a lot of transcripts, a lot of A's. Some of this is because a lot of these students are coming out of the pandemic years, and oftentimes there's been a sense to where teachers were giving a lot of benefit of doubt. sort of giving maybe maybe more A's than perhaps maybe they could have or should have. We can kind of dissect the motivation another time. But what ends up happening is that there is a documented grade inflation. So like MIT, Dean of Admissions says our research has shown that in most cases we cannot reliably predict students will do well at MIT unless we consider standardized test results alongside grades, coursework, and other factors. And the reality is that, yeah, the other factors are becoming a little bit more homogenous. We need to include test scores at this stage. So what do I do? Plan on taking the SAT or the ACT. So just work on it. Especially if you're a ninth and 10th grader, you should prepare for it, plan on taking it. And if the score is an asset to you, that's great. And if it's not an asset to you, that's okay. There are actually still a lot of schools, including all the UCs, that are either test optional or don't consider testing. But it's important for students to prepare for it, and take it and give it a shot. I would say with regards to the whole aspect of transcripts, even though I mentioned earlier that in a sense AP classes and grades are not quite enough, but it's still important to optimize your course selection to make sure you're taking as heavy a load as is appropriate for you. So don't take too many APs to where you're getting lots of B's and C's, but take as many APs as you can while maintaining as close to straight A's as you can. So maximizing your rigor as much as you can, because again, you're trying to demonstrate to schools that you can handle, transition to college and do the best that you can. So, and then you can also even consider supplementing your high school course load with community college classes, online AP courses, and you can even take them over the summer so that you can avoid so that when you have a little bit more time, and then they can supplement your transcript from there. All right. All right. So trends for 2026, applications are up. College major matters. Colleges using early decision more. We encourage you to plan on taking the SAT or the ACT. Don't forget, there are good schools out there. It's important to build a major focused resume. It doesn't mean that you need to decide your major from the first month of ninth grade, but I've always used this metaphor of a pyramid. Begin broadly, but begin to narrow down as you get to 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And then that pyramid then builds a cohesive narrative that is more easy to communicate on a college app once you get to your 12th grade. So think about the pyramid, broad, and then narrow down as you go from 10th, 11th grade, and do the things that keep you motivated, that drive your curiosity, that bring you joy. That's important. Lastly, I've been finishing on this with all my presentations. Students are stressed. I'm not saying that the stress is coming from families. It's just ambient stress, and we can get into a social media conversation another time. But students know what's at stake. They feel the pressure. So let me encourage you as parents to remind your student that you love them, regardless of how the results turn out, regardless of where they end up going to college, that your love for them is unshakable. So thank you so much. Excited to jump into questions. Let me invite Anthony back on. 10 solid minutes to answer questions, Anthony.
All
What do you
right.
think?
Yeah.
Can we
We'll
do
try to
it?
get through as many as we can. Of course, if you have anything that you want to go through, definitely put it in the comments or put it in the Q&A section. There was a request for that link of that previous admit of that data that you had. If you have that, Elton, the article.
Yeah, I will send it. I think it's easiest if we send in an email after the
Yeah, that works
webinar.
too.
So
Yeah,
we'll
because
we'll send it up. Yep.
I'll send an email with the recording also, so you'll be able to
Yep.
take a look at
Hmm.
that. So,
Absolutely. Yep.
all right. Um, a question about how you were talking early on about finding right fit schools and people looking at the South as well. A question about how Bay Area students basically are given the different cultural environment, how you've seen Bay Area students adapt in terms of going to universities in the South.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. If you look at like, I mean, and I'll kind of reference specifically like Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee, which
Mhm.
which I think they've done a great job on TikTok marketing and all their admission office tours. I think if you were to dig into some of those university campuses, resources are amazing. Buildings are very well developed. I think student experience is generally high. Um, I'll be very frank with like Bay Area students. We just have not seen a ton of our students go to the Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee. I'm not like this is not a debate on the merit of those schools, et cetera. It's just we just have not seen that many. And I think if you were to also include now, if you were to include, like, say, Texas as the South, I would say if you include Texas and Georgia as the South, so I would say our students have been going to, like, say, UT Austin, Texas A&M, Emory, Georgia Tech, obviously Duke and UNC Chapel Hill. I think our students have been great in those places. So I think those, I don't have any, there's certainly no reservation. A lot of those places I mentioned are big metropolises and just very diverse communities. So I've not seen any issue with students transitioning to those areas. I will say that I think the micro impact is that since there are a significant amount of like students based in the new Northeast that are going to the South, that also makes the like the schools in the Northeast, like it's making their predictive analysis on who's coming more volatile.
Mm.
So, which may mean if you want an early decision to a Tufts or a Northeastern or a Boston University, they may lean more into that because of their normal Northeastern student group may be going into other places in the United States, right? So that's how you might want to think about that as it relates to obviously there's probably like 80% of the audience is California. But that's maybe how a Californian might think about that. But even if you're in other parts of, I do feel like if you're, I know we have a family from Austin, Texas. Thank you for being here. You're kind of that also makes a student from the South who's applying into the South actually a little bit more challenging. So that's a part of it as well. So, but thanks for the question.
And then, yeah, question about early decision and financial aid, since it does seem like the school is definitely potentially far more limiting with how generous a financial aid offer could be on an early decision. Just the question was basically like, are schools less incentivized to offer that for the early decision rounds?
I've found that I think schools are generally not I don't think they're particularly predatory on the early round.
Sure.
I don't find that the case, right? So I think every school has a estimated cost calculator. So it's an Obama era administration thing, and you can go on to every university should have that cost calculator. You enter in your some of your household financial data, and they will prepare for you a relatively close estimate on what that financial aid package will be. So I would use that cost calculator, and then I the package should be close. Won't be exact, but it should be close. So no, I've not found it to be particularly predatorial, but with that being said, the way that you can get out of most ED agreements is if you can provide financial support documentation that like your current year's finances don't no longer fit the total cost of attending that school, and that is one way to get out of that ED agreement. So
And then let's see. We have questions. They're all a little bit scattered, so I'm trying to group them when
mhm,
possible.
no
But
worries.
question about legacies and being less relevant in general. Do you have any insight about that as a potential trend? I think this is mainly from the Supreme Court case, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go on record and saying that it doesn't matter because that's I mean look, I feel like I'm not you know there's nothing on record to say that there is there certainly is a push and move in that direction, and I think that schools are paying closer attention to making sure that they're not over biasing on legacy. Does legacy absolutely not matter? I won't say that either. I think that would be unfair. But I do feel like I think schools are more sensitive. I think some of that came from the Varsity Blues scandal that was going on, like 5, 6 or 7 years ago. So I think there is a lot more paying attention to what some might consider as unfair admission practices, and I also feel like there is yeah, there's also a push for a move away from practices that represents diversity, equity, inclusion. And I think it doesn't mean that universities don't want a diverse student body. So in my opinion, they may they may move away from some of the more public practices of that, but they will find other ways to diversify their student body. The UC's affirmative action was rendered illegal in the early 2000s, but the UC's are more diverse now than they were in the early 2000s. So schools will find a way to do so. I realize that may not be the question, but 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 so be it. Yeah.
Um, a question about I think this was early on when you were discussing major and relevance with a particular extracurriculars or being able to help a student plan that out. But how would you help a student if they are not sure about the specific major or intend to apply for schools that claim that, hey, we don't expect a student to declare a major?
Yeah, there are many of the Ivy Leagues are not overly major focused, including schools like Rice, a lot of liberal arts colleges. They're from a functional standpoint, like once you arrive to school, they're not holding you to any particular major. Now, that's different than saying like an admissions officer who's reading an application and they're trying to understand your story in the span of 1, 2, and 3 minutes, right? So like if you're trying to read an application quickly, you're trying to understand the student story, where they're motivated on, what direction they're going in a very short amount of time. So oftentimes matching the major with the student narrative is a way to communicate that story more succinctly. Now, if you don't know what you want to do, that's totally fine. That's totally understandable. And I think once you get to say college, the reality is that changing majors is not as difficult, I think, as most people think it is. Now, certainly, if you're trying to get into computer science at Carnegie Mellon at UC Berkeley, it's extremely challenging. Understood, right? But like aside from some of those niche examples, changing majors, generally speaking, is not that difficult and very doable at many schools, including many public schools. So, so I often just say, I think it's okay to go undeclared, but if you do have some curiosities, begin with those curiosities. And if your activities and storyline matches up, I think it's, curiosities, the activities you're doing, if those two things line up, I think it makes more sense to declare that major first, begin there, maybe double major or minor once you get there. Or you can consider changing majors once you're out, or once you're out of school. So that's how I would normally think about major, because it's more than just I'm not sure what I want to do. I don't want to commit to something, but you don't need to commit to it for the rest of your college years. You can make adjustments once you're there, but think about how your application is read in the process.
And then I guess we'll go through this one last question, but a question about the Cal State system, if it's getting harder to get into the tech majors for places like a San Jose State or a Cal Poly. I think places that we may have expected might be a little bit easier for students, or for some students might kind of see that as like a safety or a backup for them. Is that also getting more competitive?
Yeah, I think the CSUs, I mean, if you're talking about specifically like California, and I think this probably applies also to the SUNY system in New York.
Mm.
I think generally speaking, the schools are still pretty accessible. So I'm not overly concerned about a student trying to get into a San Jose State or a Cal Poly Pomona. But now if you're talking about Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, I do feel like, I mean, it's been competitive for engineering for 10 plus years. I think it still remains competitive, but I don't think it's using my Vanderbilt example, I don't think it's become Vanderbilt. So I think if you want to dig into some of the UC stats, a lot of the mid-tier UCs um, in the 2024 to 25 admit pool, their admit rate actually went up a little bit. So I do, to be frank with you, once we get the 2026 results from this past year for the UCs, I think that admit rate is going to go down a little bit. But all that to be said, the mid-tier UCs are not sort of reflecting this Vanderbilt phenomena, right? So I think for the UC system is still available. CSU system is still very available, and there are still definitely some good schools out there.
Got it. I think we will call it there. There's still tons of questions, but of course, feel free. There was a poll also that launched for a free consultation. You can always reach out to us there. We can set up another call, kind of talk a little bit more details about your specific student as well.
Right. Thank you so much. And I mentioned there's a consultation link here. If you want to send us an email, you can. The email's there. Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you so much, everybody. I know that there's a lot of we will send out the links, especially for the rankings. Happy to send out the ranking links, like the highest employability, the unemployment rate article that I posted there. And so we send out those links to you with the presentation. And we will have more webinars coming. Excited to have you guys on, and we'll see you on the next one.
All
Thanks,
right. Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Yep. Take
All
care.
right.
Bye.